Welcome to the Gorgeous Gray podcast. I am Nicole Scott, your host, registered holistic nutritionist, rest mindset coach, author of the Gorgeous Gray movement, and the co-creator of the Menopause Reset program. In this podcast, we have real conversations about aging as a woman and all the pressure and uncertainty we feel as we head into menopause and beyond. Let's face it, aging is not an easy conversation to have. But I say it's time to talk about the messy middle and offer hope when we feel like giving up on ourselves. Let's talk about our fears around gray hair, our muffin tops, and even our dry, itchy vaginas and everything in between. I will help you reconnect to your feminine energy and offer real solutions from experts in their field to navigate aging as a woman. I believe we, as women, deserve to shine even brighter in this next chapter of life. So with a sense of humor and a lot of compassion, let's dive into these vulnerable conversations. Hello, gorgeous gray women. It's Nicole Scott here with a very special guest, Marybeth Shirley. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be on here.
Yeah, so she's tuning in all the way from Seattle. I'm still here in Mexico, just in case you're wondering. And today we're going to talk, we're going to really touch on, first I want to hear her story, because I always love the story of the woman who, probably went through a health crisis to where she is today, especially when you see what she's, posting. And I'm going to give her a shout out in regards to her Instagram here. So you guys can follow her on Instagram. And we met on Instagram, just so you know, I meet a lot of my amazing mentors. So it's Menopause the Primal way. Okay. And she's I'm going to say health professional. And what she does is she focuses on primal and paleo nutrition, intermittent fasting and coaching. I love your content. I just have to say it's so informative. And, sometimes when we as women fall off a little bit, your posts always come at the right moment to go, oh, I got to get back on my tight intermittent fasting, or, oh, I've been sneaking in some grains and my inflammation is starting to speak to me. So I just want to say kudos to you, Marybeth, because, you're so consistent in your posts and your messages, and the value is just so high. So why don't we dive in, because there's a story behind why you post this type of information. So I can't wait to hear the why.
Yes. Well, my why is probably like many other women out there that are talking about menopause or different health things, is I started menopause, perimenopause about 8 years ago, but I didn't know that that was what was happening. So I was going to doctors. I flew to Tennessee, I'm in Washington State. I flew to California. I went to doctors in Seattle. I'm actually on a little island north of Seattle. I went and got treated for everything under the sun and still had so many issues. So when I look back on it, I know it's perimenopause, but at the time I didn't. So my first symptoms started with incredibly heavy bleeding, like couldn't really go to the grocery store without bleeding through my clothes. I had severe anxiety. I've always had some depression and anxiety, but my anxiety during the night was so high. I was up sometimes 5 hours for a night. And normal anxiety, you're kind of, worried about something, thinking about something. And this wasn't about a subject. This was just general anxiety, kind of about nothing. And I couldn't really figure out what was going on. So it wasn't, it probably took me 5 years of going to different doctors. 1 year, I think our medical bills were like $40,000 for me. That's how much I was struggling. I mean, I had a lot more symptoms than just my early perimenopause symptoms. And that's how much we were trying to look for answers. And I found myself educating my doctors, because I'm always someone who does research, that kind of thing. And that's not unusual in menopause for women to need to educate their doctors or their health practitioners. So that's something that's really important for me, is to help women be able to advocate for themselves. So I've had all the menopause symptoms. I'm still working on some because I've had adrenal fatigue and I had to move through that before being able to completely treat my thyroid. And usually when you have menopause symptoms, you have thyroid issues often. A lot of people have adrenal fatigue. It's not unusual. So I'm really wanting to get out there. I started my Instagram account about 5 months ago, and I'm really wanting to get out there and help to educate and support women, because I know I felt really, really alone. I felt incredibly depressed. I kind of thought, if this is the way my life's going to stay, is this worth it? Like this isn't this, what I'm doing doesn't bring me joy. Like this day-to-day life is so depressing, and I can't seem to find any help. So that's kind of, the general picture of why I decided to get on Instagram and start talking about it, because I have found a lot of answers. It just took me a really long time, and I don't want other women to have to take that long. And I know there are women who suffer 10, 15, 20 years. So
A lot, right? So
yeah.
how did you find the answers? Was there a specific doctor or a holistic practitioner? Was it the books? Did you go back to school? Was it a series of, events that led you to kind of like, I'm going to try this? Like, did you experiment on your body and then start to find stuff that worked for you? What was kind of the stepping stone to the solutions to making you feel better in your body?
Well, a little bit of everything that you said. So first of all, prior to menopause, I was already on the Primal diet, which is similar to Paleo, a little looser. And I was doing great. I didn't have a problem with my weight, a lot of issues that I had, like eczema, had cleared up when I went on the Primal diet. And then all of a sudden perimenopause hit, and that wasn't working so much anymore. And I was kind of like, what's happening here? Everything I normally do isn't working. So I got stricter on my diet, really dialed it in, because you can kind of let some things go. I started exploring intermittent fasting really in depth. Like I went in, I tend to go in and get online and search and study and educate myself. So I did go to different doctors. I did look at, other blogs people were doing, looking for answers. And I experimented with different supplements, making small dietary changes, the intermittent fasting. I changed my exercise significantly. I didn't realize that I had severe adrenal fatigue, which was a huge issue. And so because I was gaining weight, because I was having all these issues, I thought, well, I guess I have to eat less and I have to work out harder. And the less I ate, the more I worked out, the more weight I gained. And it wasn't until I finally got an adrenal fatigue diagnosis that I figured out, okay, I've got to pull back on this exercise. I've got to go to just walking. I've got to just completely, let it go if I need to. I think there were months where I didn't even walk. I didn't do anything. I was so exhausted. And that was pretty life-changing for me, because I've always been very, very active. And then finally, I do have a doctor now that has been very helpful. He's helped me treat the adrenal fatigue. He's helped me work on my thyroid. He's helped me with the menopause symptoms. I do take bioidentical hormones. That has been very successful for me. And that's kind of the big picture. So I combine all those things. I'm pretty specific about what testing that I recommend for people and that I get for myself, and what the different options are. I've kind of tried a little bit of everything. And so mine's really a mix of, the bioidentical hormones, quite a few supplements, always paying attention to, am I pushing my body too much? What lifestyle changes do I make? I'm always trying to get more sleep, because that's a struggle for me. It's always been a struggle for me. And honestly, it's probably one of the most important things, which is really elusive for women in menopause, often with the hot flashes and anxiety and things, that insomnia that happens at night. It's really
Yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe how similar your story is to mine. And it totally makes sense why I'm drawn to your content, because you're speaking to somebody that went through all of that too. I, like you, was very skeptical of intermittent fasting. I've read about it, but I just never wanted to take the plunge. It was almost like there was a fear there, right? It's based on how I was trained, and have your 3 meals a day and put your snacks in between. And, even like when I grew up, it was the same thing growing up. So it was such a big change. But I remember when I started to play around with it and get used to a 16-8, actually how much better I felt, how my blood sugar results started to come around, how my insulin started to stabilize, how my brain fog started to go away. Now, I haven't played and done the like 24 or, the
Yeah.
30 or the 3 days. I haven't gone there yet, but I've had a few friends kind of encourage me to try it just to see how I feel. I'd love to just dive into this a bit because I know a lot of women reach out to me about intermittent fasting, and my experience is more around a 16-8 or an 18, I guess, like 6. What is your experience, and can you comment on more the benefits of the intermittent fasting for yourself and some of your coaching clients?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of different types of fasting you can do. And I think one of the best things you can do is break it up different during the week if you need to. For instance, like you're referencing, there's the 18-hour fast, and then the 6 hours is your 6 hours where you can have your 1, 2, or 3 meals, whatever you're choosing to do at the moment. So one of the things that happens is it's not only important what foods you choose to eat, the foods you choose to eat spike your insulin at different levels. Any kind of carbohydrates or protein even is going to spike your insulin some, fat, not usually. So it also matters though how often you eat. So your glucose is going to spike depending what you eat, but it's also going to spike every time you eat. So the kind of outdated idea of having 3 meals a day and 3 snacks is the exact opposite of what women in menopause should do. Honestly, it's the exact opposite of what anybody should do, because you're having at least 6 insulin spikes. And we know just the way we live in our society, and it didn't used to be this way, we can kind of munch all day. Like, it doesn't even have to be 3 meals and 3 snacks. It could just be this ongoing eating thing, because you just eat a little at a time. You're never particularly full, just kind of keep going. So what I realized was I was already doing some intermittent fasting without knowing it. So, but I got really excited about it. And it is something I am very excited about and helps a lot of women. It really helps to lower blood sugar, which is really, really important. And I think almost every menopausal woman that I know wants to lose at least a little weight. And it helps the other symptoms like hot flashes and different things. So I started with maybe 16-8 or 18-6, something like that. And I typically would only have maybe 2 meals during that time, because it's kind of a lot for me to get in 3 meals. And 2 meals a day is something that I really recommend if people can get to that, because that is fine. And people can get all the nourishment they need in 2 meals. This 3 meals a day thing isn't for a reason that we really, really need it. So it's kind of life-changing. So like during my week, I might do, 3 or 4 18-6s. I'll do 1 or 2 24-hour fasts. So some people call that OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. Sometimes hard with all the lingo around for people to know what's going on. Sometimes 2 meals a day, a 36-hour fast. Sometimes I've done 42-hour fast, 48-hour fast. I've done longer fasts. Now that I realized I had adrenal fatigue though, and thyroid issues, I don't push myself to the really long fasts, because that's the other thing I was doing when I was gaining all that weight. I was like, oh my God, I got to fast longer. I got to exercise harder. I got to eat less. And it's the exact opposite. It really can stress your adrenals. So that's one of the things I like to work with women, is to really understand how much stress are you under? Do you either have adrenal fatigue, or do you have stressed adrenals in general? Because that really informs how much fasting you should do. And at the very least, I'd always recommend 12 hours. Stop eating at 6 o'clock, don't start eating till 6 the next morning. And at the most, do 3 meals in a day. So for some people who are used to snacking all day, going to 3 meals a day, I consider the start of fasting for them, because that is brand new. There are people, I think a lot of people who eat at 10 o'clock at night right before they go to bed, that do the snacking all day. So you're not going to find anybody out there saying 3 meals a day is fasting. But when I'm working with someone, I do, because that can be a really big deal for someone. It could be a really big step. And honestly, that can be all they need. Sometimes it just depends. It's so individual. So I'm pretty passionate about fasting, not just working on changing what you're eating, but definitely how often. It just makes a big difference.
I love how you are flexible. I love how you're doing kind of like a not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I love how you're supporting women with adrenal fatigue, that long fast will really stress out, will stress them out, right? So
Yep.
how about protein? Protein is a big one that I get all the time. And I know there's a lot of women that I follow that are like, okay, if you're 150 pounds, you do 1 gram of protein per. So they're like, well, if I'm only doing 2 meals a day, how do I get 75 grams of protein in 2 meals? And then, they start to look at their plate and get overwhelmed, or, am I doing a shake? Am I doing a piece of chicken? Am I, putting 2 extra scoops in? So what is your recommendation when it comes to protein for women? Because I know that's a big stress factor for women in menopause. I don't know where to get all my protein.
Yeah, and it is important. It is really important. So a few things I do. First of all is choose your protein first. If you're having trouble getting it in, try to choose your protein first, just to get into the habit of kind of understanding how much protein you need. To give some guidance, I usually say 1 gram of protein per what your, lean body mass is, just to give people an idea if they need it. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. I don't think you necessarily have to track it, but it is important as we age to get even a little more protein than we used to. So I think one of the great things that I recommend that people do, and it's great for a lot of reasons, is if you're doing a shake, if you're doing like a whey protein shake and you've got all your other stuff in it, some people put nut butter in it, get collagen powder. We need it for our hair, we need it for our skin, we need it for our nails anyway. And you can get flavored, but you can get flavorless. You could put that in your tea if you wanted. You could put it in other beverages if it's flavorless. You can definitely put it in your shake. And that gives you a lot more protein in one sitting. If you're doing a shake, you might as well put it in there, and it's good for you for a lot of other reasons. So I usually have people focus on the protein first, and then track it if you need to. If you're like, I think I'm really far off on this, you could track it in something like MyFitnessPal. I love those kind of things. Not everybody does, and I don't think it's a requirement. But I say eat protein first, add additional protein wherever you can. Those are kind of my main things. But everybody's individual too. So I try to just, help people do the best they can and do a little better as we go along. Like all of these things we're talking about, you can't possibly start with all of them at once. We're going to start with one thing, move through it, add the next, So same with protein. Just give yourself time to build up to it, because it's true. Sometimes I have a hard time in a day eating enough protein.
Love that. Great suggestions on the protein, and to make it kind of like where am I going to get it from, right? And then fill it up with those beautiful vegetables. I know you promote a lot about your vegetables and your cruciferous vegetables to support the liver and the detoxification. So if there's a woman that is listening to this podcast and they're like, okay, this is great. You've talked about testing and adrenal fatigue. I don't even know where to start, because my doctor that I'm going to has kind of just, you're good. This is part of aging. Good luck, which happens a lot to women, unfortunately. Where would you guide these women and offer them hope? Where can they start? What does that look like of them wanting to feel good? I've gained weight, I've got hot flashes, I've got the anxiety. Oftentimes they might even go to a health food store and say, give me a magic pill. I got to just, fix this immediately. What does that look like for a woman? Where to get started, Mary Beth?
So first of all, I'd start with the things we just talked about. I'd start, if you don't have your diet dialed in, you have to look at it, because anything else you do, if you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not doing appropriate exercise for yourself, if you're not, having some decent meal timing, none of the other things that you do can make up for all of that. So, and that's something you can just do yourself. So that's great. And the other thing that I like about fasting is it's free. You can't charge for fasting, So the next thing I would say is, if you have a doctor like that, you have to understand your symptoms. You have to understand where they're coming from. You can, get on Instagram, get on people's blogs, do some research, try to find out information about what your symptoms are relating to. And the reason why I include with menopause and the sex hormones, which are like the estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, the adrenal fatigue and thyroid, is they all interact. They all go together. So what I say to someone is, first of all, if you have a doctor that's open at all, take in some articles, send them an email ahead of time, say, I have some things I want to talk about. I have some treatments I want to try. I want to talk to you about this. But if you get completely shut down, you really need to look for another doctor. And then I suggest looking for a functional medicine doctor. And I can't stress enough, and it's unfortunate, but we have to learn to advocate for ourselves. And one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is I want to help women advocate for themselves, but I also want to advocate for them. So you can take your health coach with you on a Zoom call if they're not local. I can provide a checklist of symptoms for you to go in and say, look, I've got this whole list right here. Sometimes it's hard when you're in front of the doctor and they're kind of like, I don't know what to do for you, or that's just the way it is. It's even hard to remember what your symptoms are. You kind of feel like, well, maybe it wasn't that, maybe it's not that bad. I don't know. It's a little confusing when the doctor's there kind of telling you it's not a big deal the way it is a big deal. So I like to send people in either with articles or checklists. If that doesn't work, look for a functional medicine doctor. And one of the great ways to look for a functional medicine doctor is to look for a compounding pharmacy in your area, call them and say, hey, what functional medicine doctors do you recommend in our area? If you're interested in bioidentical hormones and the doctor you're working with isn't interested in working with hormones, ask that compounding pharmacist what doctors prescribe bioidentical hormones like that you work with. And they should be able to give you people in your area. And now, right, we have telehealth, so it's not so difficult, but a lot of people do like to see a doctor in person. So those are kind of the avenues. And, find a health coach, find someone to help work with you to get you through this faster and not take like the 5 to 8 years that I did. And so much money. I mean, not to mention living like that, but the amount of money you can spend and the hopelessness is really, really, really significant.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been thinking about and looking at, and I haven't gone in depth with this, but the significant depression and anxiety that women have in menopause is nothing to sneeze at. I was looking at the highest suicide rate for women is like the ages 45 to 54. And I've not heard anybody say specific with menopause, but it occurs to me, there's so many women out there not being treated that I think it's just unreal. I mean, I can hardly even believe it. And I can't believe that it took me that long to find some answers. And menopause isn't a stagnant thing. Like, I'm still working on certain things. My hormones change as I go. I have to up things, down things, move them around. So you really do need to find a doctor, health practitioner, someone to work with if you're really struggling.
I love that. And I can relate to, I wasn't as long as you, but I did hire somebody to help me. So people say, well, Nicole, you're a holistic nutritionist. I said, but I'm not an expert in menopause. I wasn't an expert in perimenopause. Now I feel like I'm getting there. I'm going back to school. I've taken some courses. I'm studying, I'm reading, I'm listening to other experts. I'm going to summits. And I'm always learning because there's so much to learn about this stage. I agree. But yeah, to invest in yourself now, like if you're feeling really crappy, like go and invest and don't accept no from your doctor. I love your suggestions, and I never even thought about that, but I love what you said about find the compound pharmacy in the area. That's so brilliant. What great advice, because I get people all the time saying, I don't know where to go. I don't, and they look online and there's not a lot of functional medicine practitioners. There's more and more coming, which is great. And we see that on Instagram, and they're promoting themselves, which is amazing. But I think it's changing the conversation. As I say, that people like yourself and me, we're disruptors of the story of what menopause should look like. And it takes, people like yourself to go out there, to share, to poke the bear, and to get women paying attention for their own health. So any last minute kind of comment or anything that you want to say to the woman that is struggling? Any last minute words of advice or hope?
Well, don't lose hope and find a support system.
Yeah.
If you're not partnered, find a friend. Join a menopause support group. I think it's really important we get this message out to women who aren't in menopause yet, so they're not blindsided, but find some sort of support. Because even once you get things, on a good trajectory, it's not a stagnant process. It's ever changing. And it's not something I've found that you can do alone.
Right.
And even healthcare coaches like us, we're going to be studying this and changing our recommendations at different times forever, because there's new information always coming out. And that's going to be the best way to help women is to keep up on what's new and available and different treatments. And that's what I'd say is, though, don't lose hope, but find a support system to start. Get that support system. You can find recommendations through that support system. And now online, like on Instagram, it's actually really amazing. And there are different health coaches out there talking about menopause from different angles, and they have different personalities. So you can find a match for you, because not everybody's going to be the right match. But don't give up hope, and don't think that you can't resolve this, because things can change. And I know a lot of people feel kind of hopeless.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I know you've got a free guide of information to help women. Where can they grab that?
It's going to be in your show notes, and it's a checklist for menopause symptoms, so you can see which of the hormones your symptoms relate to. Also has adrenal fatigue and thyroid symptoms. And then this summer, I will be coming out with a course that's going to cover all the things we talked about, plus more. So they can keep their eye on that.
Awesome. There you go. So just like Marybeth said, we will put her link in to get that free information. You'll be able to find her on Instagram and watch for her upcoming program. Marybeth, thank you so much for your vulnerable story and sharing your words of wisdom when it comes to menopause and giving women hope that there are answers out there. You just have to be patient, find the right team, and invest in yourself, because you're so worth it. Thank you for all the work that you do out there on Instagram and educating women that this stage can be really good if we take the time to invest in ourselves.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to say thank you for listening to today's episode. If this message landed for you, make sure to leave a review and tag me, Nicole Scott, at Gorgeous Gray Movement, and make sure to share with your friends. You can head over to my free Facebook community, Gorgeous Gray Movement, or subscribe to my YouTube channel for more inspiring interviews. If you are still struggling and need additional support, you can take a look at my website, nicolescott.ca, and learn more about my new Menopause Reset program that I'm so excited for. Until next time, ladies, be well and own your sparkle.